and then you're likely to be successful. So AI is hopefully an ingredient that makes that more likely, but it's not necessarily the most important ingredient that I would be focusing on if I was a new company starting today. I would really focus on the user and how you're going to solve their problems.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another fabulous episode of the Healthcare Trailblazers podcast. Excited to be sitting here with Andy. Andy Beck is the CEO of Path AI. Andy, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
So tell me a little bit about you. Where did you start and how did you get involved in healthcare?
When did I start? So I'd say I started kind of in my journey to where what landed in Path AI. Right after college, I went straight to medical school, and in medical school, I got very interested in pathology. You know, the first 2 years are basic science, the last 2 years are clinical, and I really got hooked in those first 2 years in wanting to understand the pathologic basis of disease, really seeing pathology as where basic science kind of meets alterations in human tissue that are the core kind of primary source for physicians to evaluate to determine the ground truth of a diagnosis, which then becomes the critical information to guide treatment. And I really enjoyed those first 2 years in studying, and it seemed like something that would be like, infinitely interesting to keep learning year over year. So I really liked that work. And then kind of I went in with that bias into my clinical years and just decided that, this is where I wanted to focus my attention. So I did residency in pathology. And at that time, I also got very interested in biostatistics and bioinformatics and kind of computer science. And and around that time is when I got interested in some of the stuff that we've been building even more Path AI, which is how do we extract high-dimensional data from patient tissue samples, use machine learning and artificial intelligence to reason over that data and try to make more clinically useful diagnoses for patients. So I've been in this area a very long time. So, probably 2 decades now. But the last decade, I think it's been the most exciting, just with the real step change advances in computing power, artificial intelligence, that can be applied to diagnostics. And there have also been major advances on the therapeutic side where there's really a need for better diagnostics. So that's how I started, say, 20 years ago. But I think, the biggest advance we've seen just the past 5 years or so.
So, and I don't know if I missed this, but so did you finish residency or you went into kind of the business side of it right away?
No, I'm pretty late to business. So
okay.
I'd already done a fair amount. I did college and medical school. I finished residency in anatomic pathology. I did a fellowship in molecular pathology. I did a PhD in biomedical informatics, focusing on machine learning. I was actually a pathologist, kind of doing research and some clinical work for about 5 years. Only got into business in 2016. So in the past 7 years, my first foray into business was Path AI.
Right. So how did you get? Is the first thing that kind of hit me about Path AI is that it's actually been around for about 7 years, and it didn't just sprout up in December of 2022 or January of 23. What exposed you to the world of AI and specifically to healthcare and pathology?
Yeah. So again, early things for me had a big impact. So when I was a medical student, as I mentioned, I was kind of interested in statistics and what you can do with computing. And people have been doing some form of machine learning and even AI for a very long time, like say starting in the 1950s or 1960s.
Yeah.
So I was very lucky as a medical student. My first rotation in pathology, I got paired up with Dr. Murray Resnick, who was the head of pathology at Brown Medical School, where I went to medical school. And he had a kind of a postdoc or junior faculty working with him named Dr. Edmund Sabo, who was really brilliant and was developing at that point, and this was like early 2000s, so like 2004, well before the deep learning revolution, say a decade before, was developing artificial neural networks with things like a single hidden layer, using image analysis esophagus. So it really showed me, okay, this is what people are doing today, trying to do this by eye. What's the power of using image analysis to extract very detailed quantitative features out of individual cells, and then you can use those features within machine learning models. In this case, it was an artificial neural network to make clinically useful predictions. So I got started back then, and
So interesting. So before we get into the details of Path AI and what it does, I literally last night I spoke at a physician symposium hosted by a hospital client of ours up in New York, and my speech was on AI and care coordination. And so I went around the room and asked two questions. I asked, who has actually used some sort of artificial intelligence application, be it ChatGPT or anything, like some sort of AI app, and like a smattering of hands, like maybe 5 hands go up, right? And then I said, and the room is full of doctors, all docs, right? And I said, okay, now who, based on what they've seen, heard from previous presentations, from everything in the world, basically since last year, November, who would trust artificial intelligence to be part of their care process as a doctor? And it was literally like 2 people in the room put their hands up. And so there's obviously a certain reservation from doctors in general, healthcare professionals around AI. I think also the fact that it's become such a buzzword in the last year is really kind of tarnishing its reputation, if you will. Like, a lot of people, anything that you hear AI, it's like, okay, just another one. It's like just becoming noise at a certain point. So I guess my question is to you, having been doing this for almost 10 years, way before this was like a public facing, everybody knows about it type thing. I mean, in your world, I'm sure everyone was talking about it, but in general society, I think got exposed in November. How would you explain artificial intelligence to your 65-year-old doc?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And it's super interesting to hear the feedback you got when the question is framed that way. So I think AI can be in generally more.
One second, Andy. 1 second. You said when the question's framed that way. Sounds like.
Oh yeah, that's not how I would frame the question. Yeah.
How would you frame the question?
For us, I mean, so first, AI is just one part of a very complex technology stack that is very complicated. I'm not going to get into the details of any of the particular technical solutions. Very much trying to empathize with the user, understand what their problems are today, what are the failures of the products that they're currently using today, of which there are many, and then describe a different future where they're using a new product that will have a meaningful impact on what they care about: efficiency, quality, cost, whatever that is. And just, if they want to get into the technical details of the implementation, which may include AI, that's fine. But completely focusing on the problem space and then how the solution, the full solution, not just the algorithm within the solution, solves that problem. And I mean, that's how you have a very clear conversation for an AI-based product, or really any new technology or new solution, is really focusing first on empathy for the user, true understanding of their problem, and then a really description they can relate to of a vision of what the solution is. And would you want that product? Would you trust that product with those characteristics? That's a much more targeted, specific question than would you trust AI, which is impossible to answer.
I love that. Yeah, brilliant. Yep. Sorry, go on.
No, that's it. That's all I had on that one.
Okay. No, that makes a lot of sense. I was trying to kind of confirm though that, like, if you do approach it that way, there's been kind of like a you know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's kind of like a bias, an anti-bias almost towards general technology.
Yeah. So it's really not focusing on the technology, focusing on the problem and the evidence of the solution and why it should be trusted, assuming that the correct stance is skepticism, like that's the rational, scientific, correct place to start. And people need to be convinced otherwise with data and hopefully actually using the product and proving to themselves that it works. And that strategy has absolutely been critical for us for both our work in drug development and research and also our work with pathologists.
Yeah. And you're obviously spot on. I mean, one of the subsequent presentations was regarding colon cancer, and a couple of the slides were about AI's application in detecting polyps, and to your point, it was very well accepted by the crowd when there's an actual picture up there, and here's a polyp that we would not have seen, and this technology found. And so yeah, absolutely. And I love that advice, and I think that's good advice to kind of all AI conversations. So let's go back to the question: how would you? But if you're so maybe that is your answer. You're not going to explain artificial intelligence to a 65-year-old doctor. You're going to explain the specific solution to their specific pain point and problem.
Exactly, and that's truly what we're focused on at Path AI is how to solve specific problems for users in pathology, but also in drug development. And we really have to have the full solution to that. And I think that's going to become, as these very, very strong foundation models become more ubiquitously available, it is going to be the full solution that's going to be the most valuable, we think, asset. One is data, but even other than that is the full solution. Whereas, models, we're all very fortunate that the field has advanced so much that we all now have access to, world-class computing resources and world-class algorithms. So what the world needs more of is really well-validated full solutions that solve actual problems for users.
Okay, so many questions. Let's just get the foundation of what is Path AI, who's the user, what's the use case, what does it do?
Yes, so the key data type for a significant amount of clinical research as well as clinical practice is microscopic images. So that's a core data type, is a piece of tissue removed from a patient. For example, if you get a biopsy of your colon and you want to say, is this a polyp or is this an invasive adenocarcinoma? There's no way of knowing that definitively from a blood test or even from endoscopy. You have to actually take a piece of tissue, send it to the pathology lab. That piece of tissue is then put on a wax block. A thin kind of 4 or 5 micron section is put on a glass slide. And even today, that remains the ground truth for deciding, does this patient have colon cancer? Do they have something else? Do they have evidence of inflammatory bowel disease or something else? So today, the standard of care has been for 150 years looking at that image unassisted under a microscope. But what we've shown at Path AI and what our solution does is it takes as input a whole slide image obtained from that slide. So one piece of hardware required as input into our system would be a whole slide imager, which is sort of like a big camera that takes very large pictures from this glass slide. The pictures are actually ingested into our platform. We have our AI site platform that takes these images, analyzes these images, can analyze with single cell resolution the contents of the image, and then provides those results back to the user, whether that's a user in a lab or a user in drug development, so that they can know with significantly increased efficiency, quality, the contents of the case. And I can give more specific examples of what those outputs are, but you could say, like, is cancer present, yes or no? What are the cellular constituents of the slide? How many different types of cells are there? And then that can inform other efforts that are ongoing. For example, understanding why certain patients are responding to treatment, yes or no. We can provide a set of quantitative features to inform that analysis. And we also have tools that can assist pathologists in other tasks.
So you still have to take that little piece of tissue out, but the actual image is then analyzed by Path AI rather than under a microscope by a human.
Yeah, and just to be clear, it's in many cases it's Path AI augmenting and assisting a human. There's certain research applications where it is like fully just generating data for use in data analysis, but in many cases our outputs are augmenting humans who are also interpreting the image, but now instead of just interpreting the raw image, they're interpreting the image with these helpful augmentations provided by the AI.
So you're suggesting, hey, you might want to look there, or like
exactly that kind of thing
look like for the user.
Yep. Exactly.
It's so interesting. And so how has the learning curve for, so one of the interesting things about artificial intelligence is that it grows in an exponential fashion, which is why people think it's going to take over the human race, because it's going to get much smarter than us. But how has that journey gone, from an accuracy perspective, from when you started with this till now? What kind of exponential or like differences have you seen?
Yeah, so I think it's a great question. It's very much structured, that question, and the way we've seen the future. You mentioned we've been around for 7 years. The way we've structured what we focused on as a company, and where we see the future going even more from here. So I can start at the very beginning. I'd say what we've done differently than other companies. We very much thought that this is going to be a platform solution that will get better over time, and we're not going to be focused on a single application. In a way, because of the way the technology works. If you make big investments in data, big investments in machine learning architecture for training models, as well as investments for the core application areas, sort of obtaining accuracy in specific tasks is something that will get better and better over time. So you don't want to like say, year zero, we have this awesome model, let's just put all our commercial resources behind this model. It is, we think, very important to be a technology company here, so that we're continuously, each year over year, having the best models for all of these new applications. So one is really building a technology platform to enable development of new models and deployment of new models at scale year over year. Because I think this improvement, to your question, is going to continue year over year, and we're not going to be satisfied with last year's models in a couple of years. We're going to want to be able to build and continue to make them better. So how have we seen it? We had an interesting start, because right when the company started, we actually won a competition for using machine learning, which at that time it was a huge mix of techniques. We were using deep learning. A couple other teams were using deep learning. Many other teams in the competition were using sort of older approaches. It was controversial which approach is going to win. We won the competition with deep learning. It turned out the next 4 or 5 teams out of, say, 30 or 35 were also using deep learning. So this was just like one example within pathology that like deep learning is the future, and people not using it are going to be beaten by those using it. So we did very well at that task, that single task, identifying metastatic breast cancer in lymph node biopsies. This was back in 2016. So that was actually part of the impetus for forming the company, because to your question, we said, if it works on this, it will ultimately work on everything. And then the hypothesis that a pathologist alone is superior or not inferior to a pathologist augmented by AI, it was not even true for this one little application in the research setting back in 2016. It's obviously not going to be true if you look ahead a decade. Every pathologist being augmented by strong computer vision technology will be superior to pathologists operating alone. That remains our hypothesis. So I would say the big difference conceptually is there we had to build specialized annotated data sets for relatively narrow applications. And you'd have a big project and a project team that might spend a year building one application. And in pathology, there's literally thousands of small applications. So any pathologist is thinking about thousands of different diagnostic categories when they look at a slide. So having a single model that does one very small, narrow thing very, very well, it's useful, but it's not transformative. And I think for the first few years of the company, that's the way things seem to be going, because the models were not generalizing that well across different tasks, where you need a different model for a different stain in a different indication. What we're seeing now is the data has reached a big enough scale on the training side, and the deep learning models have continued to get better and better for vision, that we can now train on far more data than ever before off a very broad set of diseases, stains, sites. And then we can build models that generalize very well across many different categories of diagnoses. So now the way we see it going is from many narrow models to just a couple really, really powerful models. So our speed of being able to fine tune our models for new applications has increased tremendously. So we had already hit very high accuracy levels for narrow applications early on, but now we just see that we're going to be able to hit that level of accuracy across a very broad set of applications very quickly. So I think within the next few years, you'll see entire specialties within pathology where the full set of diagnoses can be handled by these increasingly powerful models.
My understanding is that when you're training models, when you kind of release the model, and I don't know if I'm crazy or if it's just me, but I definitely see this with ChatGPT. I hate to hate on it, but it's completely unusable to me at this point. When it first came out, it was really intelligent, and now it's literally almost pointless to me until the next one comes out. So How does that work with training the models once they're deployed? Do they get dumber and then you got to train the next one simultaneously? Like, is there like
Yeah, no,
what are some
it's
of
a
the
good
struggles around
question. I would be interested to hear. You think, and you may be right, I've seen some papers on this. So GPT-4, in your experience, has gotten worse over time?
way I cannot explain to you the frustration. Like when I
Really?
started, like I've been using it since the first day it came out. Okay. And I gave classes on it. I augmented my entire day with it. I handed it out to people in my team, like, you do this with it, you do this with it, like everything, right? And I literally cannot get it to, I mean, I've produced $30,000 courses that were all written and designed from A to Z with it. Like I've done a lot with it, right?
Huh.
And I literally cannot get it to, what was I trying to do last week? Like 3 times till I gave up. It was like I was trying to get it to like answer and like something that just took the tiniest bit of creativity, like just the tiniest bit, and it
Yeah.
was just giving me oh, I know what it was. I was looking for I was trying to come up with a creative name for a new product, and it literally was so incredibly useless. No matter what prompts I gave it, it was literally giving me the same thing. And it was like stupid names. It was literally completely useless. It also still can't do math, even though they fixed that, by the way.
Interesting.
So
Yeah.
I've literally seen it be like here to here. It's
Wow,
crazy.
that's super interesting. Yeah, so I would say we're using a very different um, model machine learning approach. So we don't have those same issues, I think, in terms of unpredictability or lack of predictability of performance over time. Um, the big difference is uh, everything we do is essentially fully supervised, and the models are fully locked before they're deployed. So the deployments alone do not impact performance, um, and we um, and we are very careful in terms of our versioning and updating with new training data. But it's a very kind of locked and separated procedure, and we're using essentially fully supervised deep convolutional neural nets for computer vision tasks. So it is different, significantly different than the types of approaches used in generative AI and things like ChatGPT, where it really is prompt engineering and then
Right.
generating new output that's not entirely deterministic based on the prompt.
Got it. You're saying there's nothing
Each
once
time.
your models are live, there's nothing being fed into it. Basically,
Right.
that's
It's a
probably the
very
main difference.
separate
Because
process.
we are actively making GPT stupid by using it, right?
I think to some degree with the reinforcement learning, the human feedback, I think that can happen, right? As they
Right. So
use
you train a
more
model, you put it out there, it's
RLHF
locked, and then you train the next model, and so on
in
and
a
so forth.
very controlled setting, and then we validate it very carefully to ensure that certainly would always be a risk that a new version in an unpredictable way is worse.
Right.
And also just monitoring performance for products that are released is very important to ensure that this kind of degrading of performance over time doesn't happen, which may not be due to the model changing. It could be due to the data set changing or something, right? That the samples, some quality of the samples is being used that was not seen in training. And although performance was very good early on, some unexpected change happened and then performance goes down. So those monitoring tasks are extremely important. We're very committed to it. I think our models are more robust and generalizable, and that's super important for our application area. It's critically important. So that's always been top of mind to us, is how do we ensure robustness and generalizability.
Yeah. Do you think Path AI or the technology in general, does it get to a point where it completely replaces pathologists, or do you think it'll forever have the role of augmenting a human provider?
I think forever having the role of augmenting a human pathologist. And I'll give you a few reasons why. One is the number of pathologists is basically flat, or certainly not increasing. It may be going down. There are many areas of the world with far too few pathologists. And the set of tasks that the pathologists need to do is getting significantly more complicated over time. One, as the aging populations get older and older, there's more need for biopsies to evaluate for serious diseases. Two, as we get more and more transformative new therapies approved, there's more information needed from the pathologist to inform the correct treatment decisions for diseases like cancer, IBD, NASH. So the tasks are getting more and more difficult. The volume of samples we think will be going up significantly per pathologist. They'll need to be augmented by tools. And you're always going to need, the pathologist is often described as the physician's physician. So it's the physician who can integrate all of the laboratory data and then provide that back in the most useful format to the clinician, the treating clinician, as well as be a consultative physician for the treating clinician. So we absolutely hope AI will augment that significantly. But there's just too few. In the US, there's something like 15 to 20,000. That it's just not, it's a small population serving a tremendously large population of people who need pathology. But I do think the nature of the work will change. So I think microscopes as the core of the job for anatomic pathology, pathologists absolutely will change to using computer monitors, cloud computing, large scale computing as like the core technology and tools driving their behavior and driving their decision making. So I think that like the style of work will change, but I certainly think the mission of pathologists will only increase in importance.
So one last question, kind of conceptual AI, evolution. There's an interesting theory or problem that I've heard described, which is that these various applications, they're going to cause a talent pipeline problem, because you basically, so you have now expert pathologists, right? But they're only experts because they've kind of had to do all the work and really finding, and really being really good in that middle part of the pipeline. And so if you have the experts up here, and then you have AI basically taking over the whole middle, so it's basically processing everything and then heading it up to the experts to then move it one way or another, you basically will, within, 20 years, 50 years, whatever it is, people will stop getting through that tough period to then go on to become experts. So you'll end up with basically a bunch of beginners and then AI, and no one's going to be on top of that. Did you ever think about that? Do you have any thoughts on it?
Yeah. So let me just try to restate, make sure I understand it. Like, I think a different way of phrasing it is that, will humans' ability to interpret these images without assistance, will that skill, which is a real skill, will that degrade over time as they're more and more augmented by AI, and AI is doing a lot of the, you could argue, heavy lifting, or at least tedious lifting, and is there a risk for people's visual acuity for doing this to degrade, which is the most specialized skill that you learn as a pathologist, is literally sitting in front of a microscope for a couple years. And the training is mostly with the multi-headed scope, where another pathologist is telling you what you're looking at, and then you build the internal neural network to understand what you're looking at, of which you're like have no idea on day one, and then it's completely routine 2 years into it, let's say. Well, that skill degrade. That's kind
Thank
of
you. That's a lot more coherent, what I was trying to say.
No. I just wanted, yeah, I think that's definitely a risk. I mean, there's a couple ways to mitigate it. The other one is, would over trusting of the AI system at the same time that that's happening, could that create problems? So yeah, I think that's an important risk that will be important for residency programs, perhaps to not change what the first 2 years are like, and maybe there's limiting returns once you've really really had to learn, what all these different diagnoses are without the assistance of AI, so that you can be a better partner to the AI assisting you, and you can have better judgment for correcting the AI when it's wrong. So yeah, I think there's several ways. Certainly, there are ways of getting around it, but I think if we went in without thinking about that, that could be a risk. I think we see the same thing with technologies like GPS, where I know that everyone, I think, feels less comfortable walking around unassisted, probably in their own cities, let alone other cities. And then the question is, has anything important been lost due to that? So yeah,
right.
I think that's always a risk.
I think you make a great point. And to your point, actually, about GPS. So I started flight school. I didn't finish it because I realized that unless I'm going to go all the way, it's completely pointless. But in flight school, there's a lot of technology that you can use. There's GPS technology. There's like any good plane has it's all glass and it's all modern tech. But you don't get to train in that. You don't get to get your certification in that. You have to use those air instruments, whatever they're called.
Yep.
Six pack with the, you have to know how to use all of those instruments without any power and without any modern technology before you're not allowed to train on those instruments. You can use them
Yeah.
after, and that's fine. But so yeah, that's a solid
Yeah,
point.
I think the training is really important. So I think it's a great point. I like the flight school analogy that you can't just use the auto flight when you're getting trained. I think something similar could apply. There's also this sort of like, time is essential, sort of zero sum. You only have so many hours in the day to train. You only have so many years that you can train for. So what can we now fit into the training that we couldn't before that could be very important in the future of medicine? Statistics, genomics, transcriptomics, better understanding of next generation therapies, where that's going, how pathologists can be the most valuable physician's physician or consultant to the physician. It may not be doing the low level visual tasks, because some of those may be taken care of very well by AI, but there's going to be plenty of other challenges for really helping to improve healthcare that perhaps more attention can now be focused on.
I love that. Yeah, solid insight there. So Path AI been around 7 years. You guys are crushing it. I know. I mean, according to LinkedIn, you've raised $100 million. You have almost 400 employees. And this was your first foray into business. So first of all, what's your patient or clinical metric of success? Is it like number of, what is that metric that you get to brag about?
Yeah. So, I mean, our long-term metric, our mission as a company is improving patient outcomes with AI-powered pathology. And there's a few different ways we aim to do that. One is through the application of our tools in drug development. So having a really meaningful impact on the approval of new effective therapies. That's one way where this technology, AI-powered pathology, could improve the lives of millions of patients if we really help a new drug be approved that will be effective treatment for serious disease. And the other is really focusing on accuracy, reproducibility, and more effective prediction of clinical outcomes on clinical samples in the real world, where, long term, we really want to scale our applications from drug development to really make a big impact in clinical care. So I think a metric we would use is, how many patients are positively being impacted every day through use of our technology, because we would have proven that our technology can make diagnoses that are more accurate, more reproducible, and in some cases more predictive than manual alone. So It would be first validating the evidence that our technology really is better than pathology alone, and then two, really trying to scale the usage of these around the world.
And where are you at right now? How many patients? Or see, it sounds like you've done a lot of work on A, which is validating the.
Yeah, so I'd say we're still in the early stages. We have done a lot of work, certainly in drug development's been a major focus of the company. We just, in the past year, achieved 510K, which is a regulatory clearance for our viewing platform for use in diagnostic laboratories. And we've released our AI site RUO platform, which means research use only as well, for use in laboratories. And we're in the early stages of really moving beyond the digital platform, but augmenting with AI for the clinical side. So I would say we started more in research. We've now built a lot of the core functionality to be useful in laboratories, and then we really over the coming years we'll be scaling that side of our business.
Yeah, that's awesome. So just on the business standpoint, I want to go back there. So, but you're building a tremendous company. This is your first stop in business. How did that go? How was that journey like, to go from practicing to building a $100 million company, or whatever it is now? It's probably a lot more.
No, that's so how did it go? Well, it's been really exciting. Definitely the most what's funny or interesting is it's always different when you start a company. It's or you have this kind of growth trajectory. It seems like a very different company every 6 months, so there's always new learning, and to some degree there's many of these transitions. It's not just the one in the beginning. So I'd say what's been really exciting about it is, one, just to have a mission-driven organization, which is something that uniquely you can do when starting a new company or starting maybe an entrepreneurial initiative within a larger company, but to be very mission-focused on something that could have broad impact, but sort of from a technology and business model and go to market is relatively narrow. It's been really exciting to be able to build the whole organization, not only the technology, not only the research, but also every other critical function, sort of uniquely focused on that. So I'd say that's been something really unique, starting a company that's been super motivating. And of course, tied to that's being able to attract and surround oneself with such an incredible team and group of leaders to learn from. And everything I've learned has been from the people I'm privileged enough to work with every day. And I think that's also been an incredibly gratifying part of the experience. And then to really have a way to work really closely, which I could never do before, with partners both on drug development, but also on diagnostics, and to really build strong partnerships on both of those, where we're all united in trying to improve research, improve outcomes for patients. So I think what's been unique is the way that it's so kind of the gravity of the company sort of bringing together all of these different folks has been extremely gratifying to be a part of.
That's awesome. Is there is there any particular incident or story that stands out that was like a challenge some challenges you can see coming and you can plan for them, and some things are just thrown at you. Was there anything kind of super interesting over the 7 years as you're trying to build this thing from an entrepreneurial journey perspective that you can share? Or maybe it all went fantastic.
No, we've had so many. That's why it's almost like par for the course, having these unexpected challenges. Yeah. So it's hard to pick just one. So it's the opposite of everything going so smoothly. Nothing goes as expected, and there's always lots of challenges and things that are unexpected. I think sometimes the ball bounces in your favor, and I think what's important in a company is doubling down on that and seeing when that happens, and really recognizing when something is working, because so often things aren't working, but it's sort of like doubling down on what's working, and just really listening to customers. So my first example of that would be, I was very fortunate when we started the company that essentially the first phone call we received was from someone who had just started at one of our first partners, remaining one of our strong partners, which is public, Bristol Myers Squibb. Someone who had just started there and said, digital pathology and AI sounds really interesting. I think there could be potential in drug development. To your point, I knew nothing about drug development. I was from the world of diagnostics before then. Mm-hmm. And then just sort of learning from the partner, who was Mike Montalto, who later joined PathAI, was the person who kind of brought us in. So I don't know, in terms of one example of something that was unexpected, that was just like a phone call I received that was totally unexpected, that had a very formative impact on learning from Mike's expertise, on learning from what's happening at this major pharmaceutical company, how we could provide value over time. And, he's been an incredibly important person within PathAI, and BMS has been an incredibly important partner. I'd say when I co-founded the company with Aditya Khosla, my co-founder, that was also completely, in a way, unexpected. I sent out a cold email to him about do you want to get coffee? You're doing deep learning. It's really cool. I know a lot about pathology. Let's see if we could do something together. That's kind of how the company formed. No one knew that would actually be the way the company formed. So it's all of these sort of unexpected opportunities that happen, but it's not ignoring them and sort of taking advantage of when they happen. And things on the reverse happen as well, but you have to have kind of enough of the ball bouncing in your favor that you double down on, that you can sort of sustain all of the unexpected losses that come along the way as well.
That's solid advice. I love that. So final question for you. There's probably a dozen AI companies now popping up a day. What is the framework to think about the market, and in your mind, what ingredients are going to make these companies, these kind of second generation AI companies, succeed or fail?
Sure. Yeah. Again, I'll go back to my first answer, so there'll be some good circularity here. Really focus on the user. What is their solution today? Why is it inferior to what you're offering? How can you have a really clear kind of return on investment for them that's either true today or could be true in the near future? And if AI is a component of it, great. But no one's buying AI to some degree. They're buying solutions. I mean, unless you're OpenAI or Google or someone like that, maybe you have general solutions for everyone, or Anthropic. But for most people in healthcare, or who are not already a multi-billion-dollar company, it is focusing on a narrow set of users to start, really solving their problem, 10x the solution that exists today, have a business model that makes sense for the customer, and then you're likely to be successful. And so AI is hopefully an ingredient that makes that more likely, but it's not necessarily the most important ingredient that I would be focusing on if I was a new company starting today. I would really focus on the user and how you're going to solve their problems.
Brilliant advice, Andy. It's really a pleasure to chat with you. I wish you tremendous continued success with PathAI. Excited to see the incredible applications and the hopefully millions of patients that you will help and the doctors that you will help augment. And I think it's incredible work. Thank you so much for spending time with us today.
Great. Well, thanks so much for your podcast. Really enjoyed being on here. So thank you very much.
And where can people find you?
People can find me at LinkedIn. Just look up Andy Beck, Path AI. Good place to connect.
Awesome. Andy, good chatting with you.
You too. Thank you.